What's up, everyone? Happy football season. I'm here with my NFL Week 1 DraftKings picks. So before we get to the picks, there's a couple of different things that I want to cover. First and foremost, there'll be NFL picks videos on Wednesdays and Fridays this season, just like last year. So if you have not subscribed to the channel already, be sure to sub. For those, every Wednesday I'll be doing my kind of like full picks videos where I cover the entire slate. Every Friday I'll be covering a handful of sleeper slash value type players, and that'll be a pretty quick video usually, but this one is usually, who knows how long this one will be, probably 20 plus minutes or something like that. So I try to be as in-depth as I can. So also a couple of other things. Number one is that you should follow my Twitch channel. I plan to do a couple of different things. I would love to do some like group lineup building stuff. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Maybe everybody in the chat and myself can kind of come together and build a lineup, and we can throw it out there in a couple contests and kind of see how it does. So I think that would be pretty cool. So be sure to follow me on Twitch. The link will be down in the description below. And the final thing that I want to mention before I get to the picks, if you are a true DFS beginner, be sure to check out the link to part 1 of the DFS Basics series that I'm doing on my channel. I've already done 2 parts so far. The third and final part will be out before Sunday, hopefully. So be sure to check out part 1 if you have not already. And, hopefully some of those things can help you out if you are a true beginner. So anyway, let's go ahead and get to the picks for week 1. All right, so starting off here with a stack like I always do, I have Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson. And honestly, since this is week 1, everybody's kind of a little bit underpriced. Not every player, but especially at quarterbacks. We're seeing a lot of very low price quarterbacks for guys who probably would be, kind of middle price to middle tier later in the season. But right now, Aaron Rodgers at $7K. That's cheap for Aaron Rodgers, but it is week 1. We don't necessarily know what he can do yet this season. He started off very slow last year. So that said, I still think Rodgers and Nelson is a pretty good stack in this particular situation. So first off, I feel like Jordy Nelson is actually a little bit expensive, and I feel like most people who want to play Aaron Rodgers and want to get a stack with him are going to look into the way of Davante Adams, which I think is a really good play. I feel like you probably should play Davante Adams over Jordy Nelson in cash games, but in GPPs, I feel like Nelson is not a bad play because I feel like spinning up at wide receiver is going to be pretty contrarian this week. I feel like a lot of people are going to really try to force, David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell in their lineup. So because of that, these higher priced wide receivers may go a little bit under owned. This Packers game is being projected to score a lot of points in this game. The Packers have the 4th highest team total on the slate right now at 27, and they have the highest game total on the board right now against the Seahawks here at 51, and they're favored in this game. So I think that it is promising to play them. I think the ACL thing kind of scared people away from Nelson and a Rodgers stack last year a little bit, at least early in the year, and as the season went on, people started gravitating towards it a little bit more. But the one thing that really stood out to me when I was looking at 2016 numbers was Jordy Nelson had 30 red zone targets last season, which was the most of any player in the NFL, not just receivers, but just of any player. And then something else that stood out to me right below that was Davante Adams had 24 red zone targets last season, which was the 2nd most of any player. So that tells me 2 things. That tells me that the Packers are, number 1, passing a ton in the red zone, and number 2, it tells me that they are just in the red zone a ton. So honestly, I really like this little stack, but in cash games, I definitely understand if you want to play Davante Adams instead of Jordy Nelson. I will also say I don't think you need to spend up at quarterback in cash games this week. So if you want to play Aaron Rodgers, fine, but I really don't think you need to be spending that much at quarterback this week. All right, so for my second stack, I have Marcus Mariota and Delaney Walker. And, honestly, I just feel like the Oakland Raiders defense is just not going to be that good this season. They really weren't that good last year. They were really bad against the pass last season, but really started to pick it up as the season went on. I feel like they're going to be worse this year. Outside of Khalil Mack, I really don't see anybody on that defensive side of the ball right now that can make, a big impact on that side of the ball. So, looking at last year's number, they allowed the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks last season at 22.5. They had allowed the most rushing touchdowns against opposing quarterbacks, or at least they were tied for the most at 4 apiece. So, and then they were also bottom 10 in points allowed to tight ends last year in fantasy. So honestly, I feel like those numbers are going to get worse, and I really like Delanie Walker. I played him a ton in 2015, and I feel like I could predict him a lot better in 2015. Last season, I wasn't quite as good at really picking up and predicting him as much and as accurately. So I really hope that I can get on the train a little bit better. But I think Delanie is definitely going to be a good play, and hopefully these two can connect for a couple of touchdowns. So for my third and final stack, I have Carson Wentz and Zach Ertz. And honestly, I feel like both of these players are just too cheap. Wentz currently at 5,300 and projected to score 16.5. I feel like that projection is about right. I feel like I could see him scoring a little bit more, but especially if you're someone who thinks that Wentz could score 20 plus points in this game, 5,300 is a great bargain for him. If Wentz does score 20 plus points in this game and throws for, let's say, 2 touchdowns or something like that, probably 75 to 80% of the time, one of those touchdowns is going to go to Zach Ertz, especially since Matthews was just traded. And because Matthews was just traded, I suspect that Ertz targets will go up. And Ertz was already the second most targeted tight end in the NFL last season at 106. Only Greg Olsen had more targets. He also had the 5th most targets in the red zone last season. And I highlighted it again here when I wrote down some notes. I wrote down that Wentz is just too cheap, I think. It's not that I think Wentz is a great quarterback and, is a must-have player or anything like that. I feel like he's just too cheap. So if you want to play Wentz in cash games, I completely understand it this week. I don't really know what to expect out of the Redskins defense this season. They were pretty mediocre last year. They weren't that bad against the pass, I don't think, but they were pretty vulnerable against the run. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out this year. But, especially Zach Ertz. I feel like Zach Ertz is likely to be the highest owned tight end on the board this week. And with good reason. 3,500 for him is just too cheap. So you need to play Zach Ertz probably. But Carson Wentz is definitely an interesting option to stack with him. All right, so moving into some running backs now. And the very first guy that I have down here is David Johnson. This is not rocket science here, people. David Johnson is a great play this week, and he'll be a great play next week and the following week, and so on and so forth. That said, I think a lot of people are really struggling with deciding if they want to play Le'Veon or David. And I think a lot of people are using the fact that Le'Veon Bell held out for as long as he did as a kind of a bargaining chip, if you will, to kind of say that Le'Veon's a better play, or excuse me, David's a better play. I disagree with that motion 100%. First off, I want to remind you that last season Le'Veon Bell was suspended for the first 3 games of the season or something along those lines, and he had I think a monstrous game in week 4. I believe he had like 30 plus carries and just had a huge game. So that really doesn't scare me. I feel like Le'Veon is probably in just as good shape as he was then as he is now. So really, you need to play one of them, all right? It's that simple. Play David Johnson or Le'Veon Bell, at least one of them. And personally, I've already been trying to flirt with lineups and playing both of them. I don't necessarily think you have to do that, but I'm very, very interested in trying to play both of them. And honestly, as cheap as you can go at quarterback, honestly, I would not blame you if you go all the way down to Deshaun Kaiser and play Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson in your lineup to do that. Kaiser, I don't think he's a great quarterback by any means. At least I haven't seen a ton of him, so I can't really speak too much on it. But, he's a quarterback, so he's going to put up, 15 points or so at least probably. At 4,800, that is just, so tempting for me at least to play both of them and go super cheap there and just maybe get an average wide receiver here and there and really just hope that David Johnson and Bell can just carry my lineup to victory, which is very, very possible. So play one of them, if not both of them. Trust me, it's going to be the right move. I wouldn't be surprised if both of these guys put up over 30 points. I wouldn't be surprised if both of them put up over 40 points. I really wouldn't. So these two guys are still going to be studs, no doubt, as long as they can stay healthy. These are going to be your go-to guys every single week at running back. All right, so next up we have LaShawn McCoy, and he is in a very interesting situation this season. A lot of people think that McCoy could have the most targets on the Bills this season. If that happens, I've even heard some people say that he could double his targets from last year. And if that does happen, he would have over 100 targets. Only 2 other running backs in the NFL last season had over 100 targets, and you can probably guess both of their names. I just talked about them for a long time, in David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell. So Honestly, McCoy is a great play this week, and if you can't get to where you can play David and Le'Veon, this is obviously a good alternative. So I think that a lot of people are going to play McCoy. Honestly, I feel like a lot of people will play them just because I think the Jets are awful as a whole. And, I really don't know what to expect out of the Jets defense this year. They were pretty average on defense last year, I believe. I know their front four got a little bit worse because they lost Sheldon Richardson to the Seahawks. I believe they traded him, actually. So, obviously they're not going to be quite as good up front now. So that could bode well for McCoy and the Bills' offensive line here. But that said, I actually hope he can't run the ball too well. And I know that sounds really weird, but I'm really hoping they have to pass the ball to him to get the ball in his hands. I think that would be a great thing for us. I want to see lots of screens and out routes and dump offs and swing passes and different things like that, because we could just start stacking up PPR points, and I would love to see that. So, obviously I think those things can happen even if he is running the ball very effectively. But, obviously they would be more inclined to do that if he can't, run the ball too well in between the tackles. So I think McCoy is definitely a great option, whether you're playing GPPs, cash games, whatever it is. But, I wouldn't be surprised if his ownership is relatively high. All right, so rounding out the running backs here with Christian McCaffrey, and full disclosure, I am a Panthers fan, so I'd be lying if I said I wasn't buying into the hype a little bit. But after watching this guy in the preseason, I really definitely think he is a great play, honestly. So first up, at 5,400, it's pretty crazy to think that Christian McCaffrey has not even played a regular season snap yet, and he's already more expensive on DraftKings than Jonathan Stewart, who is the Panthers' starting running back. So very weird stuff there, but he's projected at 15 points. I feel like that's about right, maybe a little bit steep. I feel like he might be a little bit lower than that, but honestly, nothing too crazy there in projection. I feel like he's probably going to hit that, if not, maybe a little bit more. So I don't know. Like it's tough. I think the roundabout that number sounds about right, but it's really going to be dependent on how much the Panthers actually use him, which it sounds like they're going to be using him a lot. So the very first thing that I have written down here about McCaffrey is that Newton is not 100%. And that should be kind of self-explanatory, but because Cam Newton is not 100%, I actually think it helps McCaffrey's value. Why? Because I'm really not sure Cam can make all the throws right now. And if he can make all the throws, it still doesn't hurt McCaffrey, but I'm just really interested to hear what Cam says. Obviously he's not going to tell us he's in pain, but if he can't make these throws, I suspect that McCaffrey's going to get really involved in the pass game, even more so than people are already thinking. Because if Cam can't throw the ball more than 15, 20 yards downfield without it hurting his shoulder, expect tons and tons of short little dump-offs to McCaffrey, and not just McCaffrey, but other players as well. And if that's the case, then that will obviously go really, really well for McCaffrey. I also wrote down here that he proved that he can run in between the tackles in the preseason, and he did just that. He really didn't run all that often. It was really like the Panthers were trying to preserve him because they knew how much he was going to get used this season. So, I expect him to be a vital, vital role. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets carries and, work in the red zone over Jonathan Stewart. I don't think he'll be used too much in goal line situations, but I suspect that he will be used pretty heavily. So very, very interested in seeing how the Panthers use him, and I really hope he becomes a vital part of their offense. So last year I got asked a bunch to share Thursday and Monday night players. I'll probably never share Thursday night players. I almost never played a Thursday night slate unless it's Thanksgiving, just because a Thursday night game historically has been really low scoring, and I just don't enjoy targeting fantasy players in that game, so I usually fade that game altogether. But I decided I'd go ahead and start off with a Monday night player in our wide receivers here, and that's going to be Michael Thomas. So nothing revolutionary here. Brandon Cooks is gone. He's on the Patriots now. Willie Snead's not going to be playing because he is suspended. And, I'm really interested to see what's going to be happening with the run game in New Orleans. We have to see what Adrian Peterson is going to be doing. If he turns into the player that he used to be several years ago in the Vikings, then yes, look out. But I don't suspect that's going to happen. I think the biggest concern that I have here is that if Adrian Peterson becomes more of a threat in the red zone, and if that happens, I'm concerned that it may take away some of the work that Michael Thomas was getting in the red zone or was going to get. But I don't suspect it's going to be too much of an issue. I also wrote down here that Michael Thomas is very sure-handed. He actually had the highest reception percentage in the NFL among wide receivers last year at 76%. So when Drew Brees throws the ball his way, he catches it almost every time. So that's a very reliable, guy to have on your fantasy team. He's definitely a player that I would be putting on my team likely, especially if I'm playing cash games with the Monday night game involved. So, he's definitely a player you should keep in mind. So next up, I have Doug Baldwin, and this is a guy that I am very intrigued by. Well, first off, I've already talked about the game total and whatnot for this Packers-Seahawks game. I have no idea why Vegas thinks it's going to be as high scoring as it is. I personally don't think it will be, but because it is, I'm very interested in these players. So with that said, Doug Baldwin kind of jumps to one of the higher names on the list for me because he's a pretty viable option here for the Seahawks. And at 6,700, he's not poorly priced. I feel like he's about right, honestly. So a projection of 20 points, once again, I feel like that's very steep for him. I feel like that's very high. I see him more into the 18-point to 17-point range. 6,700 is 100% worth his price. So, once again, they have the highest, game total on the slate at 51. And he, too, just like Michael Thomas, is a very sure-handed receiver. He had the third highest reception rate in the NFL last season at over 75%. So I really like Doug Baldwin in this situation. I feel like he is a very multi-purpose player in this particular week because you can play him in cash games, you can play him in GPPs. I feel like he, is going to be very versatile in that regard, and don't really have to question it too much because I feel like he really can be used in both fashions this week. All right, so closing our wide receiver position here with Michael Crabtree, and honestly, I am really shocked at how cheap he is, honestly, compared to Amari Cooper especially. He's $1,200 cheaper than Amari Cooper, sitting here at $6K. And honestly, I want to play Amari Cooper really bad, but I just can't bring myself to play Amari Cooper until I see his red zone usage go up. It's been heavily talked about, and it's been well documented, and it should continue to be well documented until it increases, because Michael Crabtree had 21 red zone targets last season, which was top 5 in the NFL. Right below Michael Crabtree on the board here was another Raiders wide receiver not named Amari Cooper in Seth Roberts. Seth Roberts only had 84 targets all of last season. 20 of them came in the red zone. So that shows you how much the Raiders do not want to use Amari Cooper in the red zone. And that's really, really concerning to me for a team that looks like they're going to be moving the ball a little bit more on the ground this year since they have Marshawn Lynch now. Obviously, Latavius Murray is out in Minnesota, I believe it is. So I suspect they're going to be running the ball a little bit more than they did last year. So they'll probably be creeping into red zone type areas where they'll be looking more at Crabtree than they would Amari Cooper. I like Crabtree in a situation. I don't think I'm going to play him in cash games. I don't feel that good about the matchup against Tennessee. But if you wanted to go that route, I guess I couldn't blame you. So I definitely would be looking at him in GPPs. But honestly, either way, I can't blame you if you wanted to play him in cash as well. All right, so finishing up here with a couple of defenses. The first one is the Texans defense. And I know a lot of people want to pay up for the $3,900 price Bills. Honestly, I don't have much interest in the Bills this week. I know a lot of people want to pay that because they're playing what a lot of people think will be a historically bad offense in the New York Jets. Honestly, I just don't think the Bills' defense is that great. And I feel like, yes, they may force a few turnovers, but I just think there's more value elsewhere, a little bit cheaper, and probably can get just as much, if not more, points. So I'd rather pay $100 less and get the Texans' defense that I feel much better about their skill level. Their front seven is very good. I don't mind their secondary too much. And plus, they're facing Blake Bortles and the Jaguars, so I think it's a stone-cold lock for at least a pair of turnovers and a handful of sacks. So I really like the Texans defense this week. I also like the Rams defense at 3,200, especially if you're going to be playing David Johnson and LaShawn McCoy. I think the Rams defense is a great, not David Johnson and LaShawn McCoy, David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell. I think the Rams defense is a great way to get a little bit of a cheaper defense here and kind of, get a little bit of salary relief here at the defensive spot without sacrificing too much, because the Rams are going to be going up against the Colts without Andrew Luck. And a lot of people I've heard and that I've talked to, a lot of my friends think that the Colts could be really bad even if they had Andrew Luck. So without Andrew Luck, they very well could be worse than the Jets this season, which is hard to believe. I don't think they will be. I think it'll be pretty close, the battle of the cellar dwellers, but honestly, they're both going to be really, really bad. on offense, and even on defense for the Colts, because they don't have Vontae Davis right now. I believe he's got a groin injury or something like that. So the Colts are just going to be really bad. So I think the Rams is a good play on the defensive side of the ball. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. I want to say thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate it if you've made it this far. Once again, remember to follow me on Twitch, because if you want to get into this group lineup making process, definitely go and follow me there. There'll be a link in the description below, and hopefully we'll have some fun with that. I'll also probably be playing Madden and other games like that if you're into that kind of thing. So check that out. I haven't decided when I'm going to do it, but please let me know if you are interested in that in the description below, because if I don't get a lot of interest, I'll probably just not end up doing it at all. So let me know, not in the description, the comments section. Anyway, thank you for watching, and all the links to everything that you need to check out will be down in the description below, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to leave it a like, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later.